perjury, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Ed, how is it decided what crimes or misdemeanors are impeachment worthy?
That is decided by the people who are elected to the Congress. It is purposely vague. And it's been made vague because the founders were afraid there would be a person who met almost every criteria to be president, except they were a scoundrel, just a bad person. And the first person that there was a trial on was Andrew Johnson. And Andrew Johnson was kind of a scoundrel. He came after Lincoln's elegance, and he was the kind of guy that would cuss out the Congress and be very angry and naughty. And they tried him on the basis that he just wasn't a very good person. And he did have some bad financial dealings and the like, and drank a little bit. But he didn't seem presidential. And he sounded a lot like Trump. So you don't have to have a crime here. In the case we're talking about is more like the Nixon case, where the crime is a crime of things you do that are totally politically motivated and an abuse of power. And that's where Nixon was going down, including his lying. But it was the abuse of power charge that was the most damning. On the other hand, Clinton simply lied to federal investigators about Monica Lewinsky, and that was enough. That's not to say that there weren't other things they could get Clinton on, including his dealings in his home state, in Arkansas, the whole Whitewater mess. So Clinton had dirty hands, much like Johnson, and people didn't think it was appropriate for him to be president. So it's appropriateness which is the standard. It is not violating a rule, regulation, or law.
How does the process get started?
Well, the process is started by the Speaker of the House saying that an investigation should be undertaken to determine whether the president should be impeached. Now, let's think of the Speaker of the House in this case is the chairperson of the grand jury, as we have in the United States, that's trying to determine whether a person committed a crime or an agency violates its mandate. So she does this. Now she has to investigate it, and she puts together a committee, or an existing committee can be used. Sometimes it's the Intelligence Committee. Sometimes it's the Judiciary Committee. In this case, she's chosen to start a special committee because of the ground these allegations cover, which are political as well as international. That committee delivers a report, and then that report is put before the entire House of Representatives, and they vote on whether there's a sufficient reason there to remove the president. Because once they vote, they've impeached. And people are confused. They think impeachment is removal. Impeachment merely means that you have violated the rules, the regulations that the House has set for the right behavior. And then you go to the Senate, and the Senate can say, we agree with that, and we're going to remove this person. But it takes 2/3 of them. That is almost an impossible mountain to climb. Johnson came within one vote. Clinton, there's a Democratic Senate, no problem. But there are a lot of senators who are very skeptical of Clinton. And after that, he was damaged goods. He could not have run for dog catcher in the United States after that. So the Democrats have two things going here. One, they can catch him red-handed in a violation of what looks like the rules. And two, they have impropriety. And three, when it goes to the Senate for the hearing, they can use that hearing to bring out all the other dirt on him and make him damaged goods. And that's what happened to every one of these people. None of them was able to retrieve their reputations after impeachment. So it's a very serious thing, even if you're not removed.
In terms of what happens in the Senate, firstly, if a 2/3 majority is reached, what happens to the accused?
The accused is removed from office. Removal from office does not mean that you go to jail. It just means you lost your office. Now, in the case here, the possibilities are, as it was with Nixon, you could face a trial for the crimes or the alleged crimes you believe to have broken. And in the case of Trump, this could be a long list, particularly from the state of New York, as well as federal crimes. The indictments would be flowing. And if he's going to save himself, if that happens, he would immediately ask for someone like the vice president to get in, and because he cannot, by the Constitution, exonerate himself, but he'd ask for a pardon from the vice president, who would be acting as president in that instance. It'd have to be done very quickly, or the wolves would be out.
It may seem like a silly question, but in terms of who takes over the reins if a president is impeached, is it as simple as that? The VP takes over as they would in circumstances of a resignation or death?
Yes, it's as simple as that. And the Speaker of the House becomes the vice president. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Love to be a fly on that wall. How long can these ones actually take? How long do you expect the Trump investigation to take?
I don't think it's going to take very long. I think there'll be about a month or so, getting close to Christmas, before the indictment comes in. And then they'll take about a month or so getting it over to the Senate and that to go on. So I think by February, early February, this game will be over. Meanwhile, think about this. We've got a lot of good entertainment here on 2SER.
How transparent is the process? I mean, bearing in mind...
Totally transparent. Yeah. It will be on television. That's like the Nixon hearings. This will be nightly TV fodder. This will be open. These investigations are not closed, except the vote in the Senate and the last hearings in the Senate. The final arguments are closed to the public, and everyone outside the Senate, even members of the House, cannot be in that deliberation.
How high does the standard of proof need to be before the House of Reps moves the investigation to trial?
It doesn't have to be high at all. It can be, we just don't like this man. That's enough. That's what Andrew Jackson faced. We just don't like this man. He's arrogant, he's rude, he's ugly, and he's stupid. Enough already.
And as we know, the Senate right now controlled by the Republican Party. If we look at the other and perhaps more likely scenario where a two-thirds majority is not reached, really there is no backup plan for a vote going one way or the other in the Senate. I mean, in Nixon versus United States, the Supreme Court found it did not have the authority to determine whether the Senate properly tried a defendant. So if the Senate fails to find a two-third majority, or indeed rules them innocent, essentially, regardless of how much evidence, is that all she's wrote?
Yeah, they don't define whether he's innocent or guilty. They just decide they're not going to remove him from office. In the case of Trump, this might be another nail, because if they don't remove him from office, while he's campaigning, he is going to be defending himself on every campaign stop. It'll be a tough act to follow. He will not be able to concentrate on campaigning. And he can't say he wasn't convicted. The only thing he can say is he wasn't removed. That's pretty shallow.
Now, on the historical side of this, you mentioned, of course, some of the names before. The House of Reps has initiated impeachment proceedings 62 times since 1789. It has impeached 19 federal officers in total. Only 3 presidents, you mentioned them before, have had articles of impeachment reported to the full House for consideration, and only 2 actually impeached, although both later acquitted. So this is not a process undertaken lightly or often on federal officers.
No, it is not. And even 2 members of the Supreme Court. So, and a couple of weeks ago, you asked me, is it possible to have a Supreme Court justice removed? Yes. And the only ones who were removed were for lying about their qualifications or activities they undertook prior to joining the Supreme Court. So there's plenty of precedent to remove a justice who lied about his qualifications.
Now, just wanted to talk a little bit more about the two presidents who have been impeached. Andrew Johnson back in 1868 and Bill Clinton, more recently, let's face it, in 1998. In terms of the precedent there, is there any lessons to be learned?
Well, I think the Clinton thing is very important here, because Bill Clinton was being tried on the basis of character. The Monica Lewinsky business just flooded the airways. It seemed so seamy, so ugly, so bad. This precedent and the Johnson precedent, where the character of the person was central, will be very difficult for the Donald, because he will want to defend himself on the basis that they didn't catch me. This is not a catch me thing. This is a thing about, are you the kind of person who should be guiding the nation? And he will not even stand up on that one, because he knows if he gets on that turf, he will not be able to fight very hard, since he shoots from the hip. He doesn't have a strategic point of view about much anything except for China. So I think this presidency would be dead in the water, as the Clinton presidency was, once the verdict is out.
And of course, you mentioned Tricky Dick Nixon as the president who probably draws the most parallels with the current administration. Famously, of course, resigned before impeachment proceedings could continue. Donald Trump, the feeling is he's a lot less likely to resign even if things reach that kind of fevered pitch. He fights and he fights and he fights, and he doesn't seem to expect to lose. Would it be fair to say if it had continued, the impeachment proceedings against Nixon might have looked a lot like what's ahead for Trump?
Yes, except Nixon was not popular with anybody by this time. He did not have the following that Trump has. Trump has a following, as he said. If he stood up on the stage and shot somebody from the audience, his followers would still be behind him. And I think they will still be behind him. And he's hoping that the court of public opinion would exonerate him. He's not hoping for an electoral victory, but the court of public opinion. Donald Trump is beginning to look tired, and his ability to govern is being questioned by people even in his own party. So the smart way for him out is to do some kind of a Nixon thing. Maybe he wins the election and resigns a few months later, claiming health or something. He wants to not lose face, but going through this process is excruciating, as the latest two presidents have shown. They both, by the time Nixon was finished with this, he looked like a man 30 years older, and so did Clinton. This is not a process that Donald Trump really seriously wants to entertain.
Ed, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you, and I hope we have some good news soon.
Terrific. Good fun. Well, actually, that brings up a hell of